This enriching conversation between our two panelists, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce both of them. First, I would like to talk about Sir Gulammohammed Sheikh. Born in 1937, Surendranagar, Gujarat, Gulammohammed Sheikh is an influential figure in modern and contemporary Indian art, whose work transcends mediums and disciplines, blending painting, poetry, teaching, and curatorial practice. His formative years in Surendranagar deeply shaped his understanding of cultural diversity and spatial dynamics. In 1955, the Faculty of Fine Arts, MSU, became his creative and intellectual home. Here, under the mentorship of pioneering modernists N.S. Bendre and the artist pedagogue K.G. Subramanian, he embraced a pluralistic vision of art, engaging with Western art history while drawing on Indian miniatures, traditions, and vernacular visual cultures. His artistic journey led him to London in the 1960s, where he studied at the Royal College of Art, further expanding his global perspective. As a teacher at MSU Baroda, Sheikh has mentored generations of artists, fostering a spirit of critical inquiry and experimentation. His works has been exhibited widely, including the Triennale, India, 1975, Tokyo Biennale, 1963, Biennale de Paris, 1967, Kochi Museums Biennale, 2014, is this Kunstmuseum Bern, 2007, among several others. He has received numerous accolades, including the Padma Shri, Padma Bhushan, and the Kalidas Samman. Sheikh lives and works in Vadodara. Our second panelist, Roobina Karode, is the director and chief curator at the Kuranada Museum of Art, a role she has held since its inception in 2010. With a postgraduate specialization in art history and education, Karode has had a significant presence in the art world as an educator, writer, and curator. She was awarded the Fulbright Fellowship in 2000 and the Ford Teaching Fellowship for 2005-2007. In 2016, she received the India Today Best Curator Award, and in 2019, she curated the Indian Pavilion at the 58th Venice Biennale, which was lauded as one of the top 5 must-see pavilions. As she is the curator, and also now she's also the curator of this wonderful exhibition of Worlds Within Worlds, which is the most comprehensive exhibition of the artist Gulammohammed Sheikh ever. We welcome both of you.
Thank you, Aditi, and just to tell everybody that in the 4 months that this exhibition is on, I think Aditi has taken more than 80 walkthroughs of this exhibition. So thank you very much for that as well. So going back to Of Worlds Within Worlds, a retrospective exhibition, and I think the most important aspect of a retrospective exhibition is that it actually looks at the span of an artistic practice and also the entire spectrum of it. And therefore, looking back, or rather revisitation, if you will, of a creative journey is what I would say a retrospective does. It looks at thematic explorations, it looks at comprehending the artistic vision, and it explores a practice, and in this case, a practice half a century or more of Gulammohammed Sheikh. It so happens that such a comprehensive showing in its physical form as in an exhibition has never happened before, though we are all so familiar with his practice and its significance and contribution. Curatorially, actually, this offered me an opportunity to gather, source, bring together, study, comprehend, and interpret a practice at once legible and accessible, but accessible visually, but also layered, complex, dense, and with its undercurrents and provocations of content. While working with the list of artworks, which was facilitated by the artist, by his gallery, Vadera Art Gallery, if Sonia Bellone is here, I would like to thank her for that, and the curatorial team at KNMA, we were looking at a dynamic and evolving art practice, and going through it again and again, I realized that I, as a curator, felt immersed, actually drawn and immersed into seeking the quintessential Ghulam Sheikh and his art practice. The sourced and selected material, and I would say that, and I would emphasize that because this is really a slice, a really small slice of what his artistic output has been and his creative energy has been. So I would say that in this very sourced and selected material, the curatorial strategy that got spatially laid out was to focus on the enduring concerns of the artist, the stimulants that shaped his practice, the different modes of visual storytelling, the shifts in his materials and formats, and most importantly, the concerns with the world at large. For instance, for me, when I was curatorially drawing these plans, I was fascinated by the idea that first there was emphasis painting, first there was emphasis painting architecture in the work, and then as you proceed, you see painting, architecture being painted in the form of carved. So there are these plays and interplays in the way that he really oscillates between how he works and what all he can really almost magically use into creating a composite world. Also, it was important to factor in the polyvalent individual, the artist, a painter, a poet, and pedagogue. And I only listed three because I like the three P's together, painter, poet, pedagogue. But he's also a scholar, he's also an archivist, he's a writer in his own right, and we all have known his contributions through and through. Writing and painting from early on went hand in hand for him, the word and the image passionately interlaced in his world. Not to forget the impact they both could bring to his teaching art history. He was called upon by his professor Ines Bendre to teach art history when he was still appearing for his final exams, isn't it, for his masters, and he had already started teaching. And I, who have been a student, can vouch for his teaching. His anecdotal style was nothing less than what you see in his paintings, where he could actually transport you to different worlds all at one time and to different visual traditions that he would bring to our cognition. The most that I remember is these crossovers into poetry, literature, history, archaeology while teaching art history. And it has stayed with me even when I started teaching. The teaching needs to have these cultural crossovers. It needs to cross over disciplines also. And that really helps to transport students to places, locations, milieu across time and space. So friends, put your hands together for Gulammohammed Sheikh as he joins me in this conversation. Thank you, sir, for being here and for the curatorial freedom with which you have just given me this total freedom to curate this exhibition with all your support, of course, and all your presence. I would again start by a very simple question, which has really been something that I've been thinking over and over again, which is, you have been pursuing something and being able to create and paint for half a century or more, which itself is an incredible achievement. In retrospect, how do you feel about it? What do you think about it? Is it overwhelming? Is it simply a daily practice? Is it still enchanting? What is it for you?
Well, primarily, to think of the retrospective was in itself a kind of an experience almost unprecedented because I had never thought of seeing my work together.
Yes.
And the fact that you were able to bring as many things as possible from variety of sources and putting them together in a manner which you only can conceive, because I didn't want to have my hand in any way. It is her creation, her curation. So I wanted her to deal with my work the way she wanted to deal with. And when I first came here, I was quite surprised that she had mixed all genres, all media, like for instance photography, drawing, gouaches, oils, and all other things, including the carvers, were standing together. Difficult to imagine all of them standing together, because in one sense when you think of a work, you almost think of it as an individual. Because that work you have spent hours or days, and that has remained with you. So you are surrounded by those days. How many days, how many ways in which you dealt whatever that came your way? How did you start, and how did you come to finally bringing it to this particular this stage at which it is being shown here? And I was truly wonderstruck that all those, in fact all those paintings or all objects which were actually, to my mind, in my mind, were living objects. They were not like objects which you put it in your house, but each one had its own language, each one spoke, each one had a story to tell. And so I was surrounded by my own stories. I don't know how many stories I concocted, but I managed to do something in the years that I had at my disposal. I was able to do it not only because I had a kind of an education which was a very liberal education. I had the best of teachers in the country. And I had the best of environs, the Faculty of Fine Arts where you studied, in my time, we were given place to work there throughout day and night. 24 hours studios are open. And I remember many of these paintings are done at night. Then you may ask a question, how it did affect your visual language. But anyway, that apart, what I remember is that it brings back all the days and hours and sometimes even the heartache, sometimes even the failures that you saw yourself in front of. You saw this painting and you said, oh, I had to discard something and I had to redo this thing. Sometimes you were totally lost and you did not know how to proceed. You had come to a stage where you were stuck. And you were stuck, so stuck that you could not move. And mentally you had to, in a way, recover yourself and your world and bring it back. And I must say that in the course of time, everything came back. So in that sense, story is full of sorrows, full of pain. Because there are also times in which if I was painting something which was related to the pain of people, like City for Sale, I was equally in pain. But then I did not want to express it in a sentimental manner. I had to find a language to speak about that and how it came about eventually, working and working and working. So if there is anything that I can say about this thing is that it brings back those whatever odd 55 or 60 years in a kind of a nutshell. I would say it's perhaps a gin is standing in front of me, and he said, open your hand and you have this whole world opening in front of me. So, thank you.
Oh, wonderful. I'm glad you mentioned your early works, for instance, here in this exhibition right here, have been quite a revelation, not just to me, but to many who are sitting here, who would have not seen your early canvases with painted with a palette knife, with thick impasto, and faceless figures, horses, horse without a cart, horse unmanned, and also your kite paper collages. We have 2 examples here, and also your gouaches. And I remember that when I visited your studio, I had this conversation with you that it is so essential for me to have this in the exhibition, because I was already seeing distant cityscapes that you were capturing in the gouaches. I was seeing something in the horse motif, and the whole idea of faceless figures, a repeated motif of the horse, the distant cityscapes, the convoluted horizons, the leafless trees, the thorny branches, all this, what Richard Bartholomew then called, atmosphere of primeval solitude, in 1963. I was very interested that this phase was happening when you were early on in Baroda, isn't it? So something about that place, because I know that in our conversations you mentioned about it was so much learning that was happening. And learning was not just about talking and speaking, it was so much about going through understanding of techniques, different kinds of drawings. In fact, only now recently we realized when Pushpamala curated those 2-part exhibitions with Vadera about how extensively you were immersed in printmaking procedures, your lithographs, your prints, the etchings, all that you did under printmaking. So there was some kind of a trigger there where a lot of you were learning croquis drawing, layering, painting with brush, and many such things that were happening. And I just want to add that these works have a very different tonality, a very different temperament than when visitors shift into this side of the exhibition. And I thought that it would be good if you can expound a little on these gouaches and collages, because later on I want to talk about how quickly you made shifts into mediums and formats. Like, for instance, by the time you go to London and to Royal College of Art, photography and collaging have appeared very emphatically in your work, and actually they started dictating your processes of working. So if you can club this together and talk about it.
Too many questions.
2 questions, yeah.
I will try to put it together as much as I can. 1960s, the first 3 years, that is from 1961 to 63, I got a job to teach, and I taught art history, a subject which I had learned as part of my studies in painting. It was not a proper art historical discipline that I had gone through, but I was exposed to art of the world. That is one. Also a period, I write in Gujarati, and I was struggling to write in a language which I would call my own. I had tried all kinds of modes, like traditional mode of writing, poem in a meter or in a song form. But there came a moment when I thought that I should destroy it all, and I should find those pieces together which I have destroyed and rejoin them and create a new language for myself. And that happened in the poems. It was also a time when Actually, let me tell you one more thing, that K.G. Subramanian, one of my teachers, whom we call Mani Sahib, knew that there were many students who could not afford to buy expensive paints and canvases, so he had boiled linseed oil, double boiled linseed oil and wax together and produce a kind of a gel. And he said you can use it by buying pigments from hardware shop. It is the cheapest possible around in. And we did that, many of us. And we just simply went wild with that. Okay, we had our plain canvas on which we tried to, paint day and night. And as you mentioned horse, because the horse was one of the motives, but I have said elsewhere that my horse was not a horse of somebody like M.F. Hussain, the great Indian painter, but my horse came from that weak little creature tethered to a tonga. And I grew up in my hometown, Surendranagar, where there were no other means of conveyance except tonga. So it was the horse of the tonga that I somehow managed to extract. And that horse became a free animal wandering around in the forest, etc., etc. Partially it was a self-image. That I was also wandering around, looking for my own world. And so all that happened in those 3 years. I had 3 exhibitions during that time. As you rightly mentioned, Richard Bartholomew, who wrote my catalogue of the second exhibition. So this was a kind of a entry into the world of art. So I found this language with which I played. But then in the 3rd year, I must have made at least 200 paintings, if not more, including washes and all that. But I painted, I just got mad and just kept on painting. But I found a cul-de-sac. I thought that this was not going anywhere. It was stuck. It came to a point where images disappeared. And it became almost what you call abstract. And I found myself lost. I said, where did all the images which I was painting have gone? Where did they disappear? And I remember that I used to get my images from poetry. I write Dylan Thomas. And I remember Darkness at Noon. And something like that. Paintings were of that kind, including the horses and other things. So it was an opportune time for me to take a break, go abroad. And I went to Royal College of Art. R.B. Kitai and Hockney had already left a year before I joined. And I looked for my own space in that world. Royal College of Art is a very well-known, and it was a very liberal institution. So I was lucky that I had Faculty of Fine Arts in Baroda and Royal College of Art in London. And my teachers, both, there was one teacher who was a pop artist, forget the name, anyway it will come to me. They were all very kind and very liberal, and we had a little cubicle in which we worked. And nothing worked. I remember once John Berger came and he gave a talk on our work. And he asked me questions about I had put some images together and I don't know whether they work together or not. But it set me thinking. It so set me thinking that I must discover my own world. So one thing which I did was to photograph my own friends, my people I knew. And then I started painting from those photographs and changed them. Peter Blake was the teacher. Yes, that is the great pop artist. And I knew that Peter Blake made collages, so I said, why not? So I made, but my collages were like I took a photograph of a friend of mine who was a French girl, and then I stuck a picture postcard of Eiffel Tower. So it was for me a new beginning, something which I had never done before, that you could stick thing on an oil painting. And that opened many an avenue. So if I put it in a retrospective way, I would say that collage was an idea. Collage was not something which was an experiment. That you could bring images or art of the world, images of your own mind or images that you want to deal with, no matter where they came from, no matter whether they sync with each other or not, but they all came together and you can put them together. So collage in that sense is a kind of a mental collage, bringing them all together. And so I would say that Royal College provided me with an opportunity to think of that, and that finally emerged into something else which happened when I returned. Have I answered your question?
Wonderful. But simultaneously, you were also going to Vienna and exploring miniatures, and you made friendship there with a person who really allowed you to see them closely and actually go through all these miniatures again and again. And I think at that particular point, you also realized how miniatures could open possibilities for you, or the miniature tradition could spatially open up many more ways of or modes of space making. That was a limitation in some sense in the illusionism of the West.
Well, that happened in this manner.
Yeah.
We had direct access to V&A from the painting department of the Royal College of Art, which was on Exhibition Road, which is next door. And we used to go to the canteen of the V&A to have our lunch, because I used to get bored eating the common room food. And on the way, I saw the Indian section, and I looked at those paintings, and there was one painting, it struck me. It was painting of a forest in which there is a moonlight and there is a hunt, a tiger hunt.
Kota.
It was Kota. So I was most struck by that, and then I went to the reserve section and I found Robert Skelton, one of the scholars on Indian art, and made friends with him. So he showed me more Kota. I said, but is there anything that I can read about Kota? He said, there is no book except one, written by W.G. Archer, his predecessor. And I got that book. But he said that I know an American art historian who is mad about Kota. He would love to talk to you. So he gave me name of Stuart Cary Welch. And I wrote him a letter, and he immediately sent me his book, God, Thrones and Peacocks, in which there are a lot of paintings from Kota. And I also eventually wrote my dissertation on Kota painting at the Royal College. But this opened another avenue, because when I first saw that painting of forest and the moonlight, what struck me was painting of Rousseau, Douanier Rousseau. And so there was something ethereal about it, something, I didn't use the word surreal, but I would say there is something which was not there. And I felt that I should look at Indian painting more in detail. And Robert made it possible for me to see the originals. And that opened multiple avenues. I would say that there were so many windows opening in front of me, and I said that, this Kota, and then Bundi, and then, whatnot, Kangra and everything. I thought that all these paintings that I am looking at are made about 200 years ago, 300 years ago, some 400 years ago, but they do convey to me, they convey to me that belong to me, that I am able to enter that world. So that gave me the idea that that these paintings had a role in the life of people who lived now. And why not? If I were to extend that language. So I thought that if I were to find a language in which I could use this opportunity that I have seen all these paintings, but I didn't want to copy those things. I wanted it to sink within me and then allow me to evolve another language. So I'm coming to that. And what happened in the process is that I made series of collages, but after that, I do remember now that once in 1968 or 69, I was traveling in a bus going near the town of Jhansi. And in that I saw there were all kinds of, there were hills and small mountains and trees and forests. But strange thing that happened is that at times the tree seemed to appear above the mountain. Was it my imagination or was it really there? It did happen to me that it really was an experience. And would I not try that? And the second thing which I thought that among things, colors that I enjoyed, I must also admit that I also enjoyed the heat, the kind of atmosphere that the summer creates in our country, when all the trees and all the things come alive, but they are totally blanched. And I wanted to work with that, and so I used yellow, but I used lemon yellow, chrome yellow, and whatever yellows that I had in mind. And I wanted to paint what you call sunlight. Can you enter into sunlight and all that? Can you bring those trees and can you bring those mountains together? So, stumbling upon all kinds of experiments here, working with them, I made a series of paintings, which some of them are here. And that is what actually revealed to me that I can perhaps work the way I want to. And so I had an exhibition of these in Bombay, and then something else happened.
No, but it's good because a lot of the visitors have loved the yellow room, which is right here, and how lived experiences, observations, fantasy, imagination, everything has come together. I want to move a little bit because I feel that London period was also a period of a lot of introspection, actually. And then you took on extensive journeys in Europe. The boat and train keeps appearing and reappearing in your work because you took these extensive journeys. And I think the shift that happened after that was that you wrote somewhere in this book, which Chaitanya has edited, about how you are now carrying many worlds that have become a part of your world. But my question to you is, how difficult was that? Because coming from a small hamlet in Surendranagar, then coming to Baroda, then from Baroda going to London, from London traveling all over Europe, coming back a full circle back to Surendranagar, which is the homecoming. Did you feel these were disparate worlds, these were different worlds? What would be the notion of belonging, or how would you really bring them together? Or was that also a need, a specific need that you felt at that time, that you actually were traversing and living in multiple worlds, and they needed to be somewhere together in you? It isn't so easy, isn't it? The transitions are neither easy when one painter has a language, so they can bring certain things together. But I think that it was this time, at that particular time, that your world was actually opening many doors for you. And with your travels, your journeys, a lot was changing. And this whole question of what can be that language that could, or what can that world be? So I'm going to just, for you, I think that is a very seminal, which is right here.
Thank you. But before that, let me give a background. When I was studying for my masters, one of my teachers, a favorite teacher of mine called V.R. Ambedkar, used to teach us European art. And in those days we had books by Skira. And there were illustrations which were stuck in the book, not printed. And there was one particular painting of a landscape which my mind got glued on. And that was a painting by an artist called Ambrogio Lorenzetti. That kept in mind when I went to England, and I thought that someday I must discover this. Like everybody else in those days, I was also on the street hitchhiking. I went from London to Italy, began from Milan right up to Naples, and saw all the paintings that I had seen in books, which I would look at them in real life, in the churches, in the museums and whatnot. That also gave me another kind of an experience of walking, that I need to discover it all by walking by myself, rather than depending upon all other sources. And I did all that. Hitchhiking gives you that opportunity to go from wherever you like. You are free, and you can go one day here and next day you are somewhere else. You sleep on the beach, or you stay in a youth hostel or wherever. And then I also, when I was returning from England, decided to go by road. I put away all my stuff in a trunk and gave it to the courier, and I said, let me go. It's a duffel bag with one pack of clothing, a camera, and I came back from London to Bombay, all the way through Middle East. Took me about 2.5 months or about 3 months, stopping at all kinds of places. And what I was trying to say is this: I was trying to build a world for myself. I was going through physically to places, to paintings which I had admired, and to see them with my own open, naked eyes, and to store them within me, so that at any time when I need, I can marshal them. And that is something that happened. But in 1969, I was struggling with a painting, and I did not know how to move. It was a painting which was a very freely done, a kind of a horse shape on top, and then there was a kind of a rough figure of an old woman. But in the next 2 or 3 years, it so happened that I thought that I would bring as many images as I can. So I painted a tree, I painted houses, I painted a tree which I borrowed from Mughal painting, I painted image of a prophet from a Persian painting. I also used a photograph of my mother. And I put them all together. You call them khichdi or whatever it is, but they are all put together. Disparate. One, that there was something which came from my mind, which meant the houses which were not the houses of the kind of houses I lived in, but there was the experience of having lived in those kinds of houses. Then the tree that I enjoyed, trees that I enjoyed, so I brought them together. Then the tree I saw in painting which I greatly admired, even angels, the images of angels that I admired, and with all that, a photographic image of my mother. How can you put it all together? No, we were grown up, we had grown in a world where people insisted on having one single image in a painting. No, you just work on that image and that's it. Well, my world was different. I belong to all of them. Each of these images were my images. And can I not bring them together? Why? Disparate. let alone, let them be disparate, but let my painting bring them together. So it was a translation of the idea of collage that resulted in a painting called Returning Home After Long Absence. So that is the painting that opened again many, many avenues. And that finally brought me to make a painting called, that was later called About Waiting and Wandering.
Which is also here. Yeah.
Which is also here.
But this is very interesting what you spoke about this painting, particularly about collaging different times, collaging different cultures, maybe collaging different ways of painting, maybe, and also images that you took from different, and this whole, everything coming together. And I think perhaps that became a way of working, which in one sense, I don't know, strategically, it also is moving away from what was the dominant style of easel painting. Then gradually you are collaging, you are bringing photographs in, you are using some other modes of, inserting an image, so to say, but opening it up gradually and gradually. I also noticed that from the palette knife phase to here, gone are those harsh, slashes of paint and, the impasto, the heavy brushwork, and you are smoothing your surfaces, you are bringing in different areas of color, you're delineating areas of color. In Speaking Street, which is one of the most amazing work of yours, you're using red as a dominant color, which is running through and through the painting, while you are inserting architecture, people, places, walls, streets, inside, outside, domestic, public, bringing it together, making a world, just emerge out of your memories, your remembered experiences, your maybe from history, from many, many, many sources that you really put together. So this is really this opening of your devising a syncretic language, a visual language, which actually takes in from multiple sources, and I think that kind of a hybridity was not perhaps appreciated at that time. I may be wrong, but I would assume that could have been something that could have been debated, discussed a lot in your time as to how are you doing this, how are you straddling so many traditions and so many kinds of...
There's one thing which I have not mentioned,
yeah,
that while I was entering into the world of what you call quote-unquote miniature painting of India, I also learned and discovered Sienese painting.
right.
That in my travels in Italy, I went to the small town of Siena. In a way, there is always a small town because I came from a small town. And I found those paintings, the one that I mentioned of Ambrogio Lorenzetti, there in the museum. Tiny painting. And then I thought, my God, whole world resides in this little work, which is about not even 2 feet. And I thought I would, if I were ever caught stealing something, it would be that painting. That I could not just think of anything else, and I went on looking for. And when I looked at more of Ambrogio, I found Sassetta, I found Simone Martini, I found Peter the another Lorenzetti, Pietro Lorenzetti, and all that. One of the things which struck me most was the love they showed in making paintings, drawing work, actually drawing their own world into paint. The paint was simmering with all kinds of sense of touch. If they painted walls as though it looked that somebody was actually touching the wall. And then again I discovered that in Ambrogio's world, the effects of good government, you could not see painting in one glance. You had to walk with it. So I learned that painting is actually in movement, in mobility. And this I tried to combine with my experience of entering into the world of Indian traditional painter. So there is what you call the Western world and what's called the Eastern world. For me, they were both part of my world. And I tried to bring together because I wanted to discover the love of painting, enjoy every part that you paint. It's not just by putting splashes of color on canvas, but even fine detail that you paint. And I could see that Chinese and the Indian painters poured their hearts into detail. Detail was the thing that you could get from detail to detail to detail, and the whole world emerges of multiple details as though, they are all done by hand, by eye and hand. And I was most struck by that. And I think Chinese painting is something which taught me how to love the very idea of using paint. Paint as part of your, in fact, it's something like an extension of your own body, that out in your.
But in structure things, you went a step further, I would say, because your worlds that you created, which we see here, you could say it's part Surendranagar, part Baroda, part Siena, part, you wanted to create a world which was much more composite, okay, in its structure, and it could draw from various sources. In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, because I feel that you could even paint a Persian cloud and a Chinese water and retain their identity, or not really try to creating a homogenizing world or a cohesive painting. You really didn't give up their specific features, but you were able to really collate, you were able to gather that, you were able to create that composite architecture or composite world that we see in your work, where in Waiting and Wandering, we would see you take something that you were inspired by from miniatures, but you would also take up Piero della Francesca's face of a child, of a girl child, or something else, and bring and interweave them together. So I'm going to actually tell you to just speak about at least one of the paintings, which is the Speechless City, because I think the social and political situation and reality was also constantly affecting you, and how that would then get incorporated into the language of painting, or also into the language of a composition of a particular kind, let's say. For instance, in Speechless City, what you do, the idea of bringing two visual traditions together, or two pictorial traditions together, but really creating such an effective, you really create a visual sound there, literally. It's a speechless city, but you hear a sound, a visual sound. Maybe you can expound on that. Yeah.
But before I answer you, let me again go back to one of the things which I was trying to say.
Yes.
About Waiting and Wandering is a way of dealing the elements of painting as kind of stations, so that you can go from one station to another station and build your journey. So the painting in that sense became a kind of an embodiment of a journey. Every painting is a journey. No matter where you enter from left to right or from top to bottom, but you sail into that world of paint, or painting would allow you to go from place to place, from closed space to the open spaces, etc., etc. That's one. But the second thing, I must give you a little introduction, that we all were we means a number of artists, friends. And I mean Vivan Sundaram, I mean Bhupen Khakkar, who was a close friend of mine, Yogen Chaudhary, Nalini Malani, Sudhir Patwar. And these are the artists with whom we constantly communed, talked about each other's work, and we had shown our works together. And so the dialogue, some of the dialogue took place actually in our house, in residency bungalow in Baroda. They all came there. And then there were painters like Timothy Hyman who came from London. And we all were discussing aspects of what kind of world of painting that we wish to build. And the issue one issue was very central to it, was that it is the life of people that we want to paint. And that is why the exhibition called Place for People that came about. But at the same time, it was also the idea of the politic. One should not put aside politics, but one should build politics as part of your whatever intentions. I was not particularly interested in doing any kind of a definitely political work. As you might know, that Sudhir Patwardhan has built his Marxist imagery. But I became more and more interested in the events that were taking place around me. And so when emergency was clamped in our country, I was struggling with a painting in which there was a figure which was multi-armed figure running away. And that went on simmering in my mind. I painted in number of ways and finally removed the figure and painted all the houses, and eventually there were only the animals which are left. So in some way it was a kind of a political response to the situation that we belonged to. So that came in the form of Speechless City, and then there were a few other paintings. Not that every painting is political, but politics is in every painting, no matter whether it deals with the political event or not. So that becomes, so in a way, these were the lessons which being learnt in the 1970s and 1980s. And that is how Place for People, the exhibition that we all had together, both in Bombay and Delhi, brought about.
Did that also mean an emphasis on local experiences, of Indian reality? All of that, did it also mean that there was a need to look at one's own reality, one's own lived situation? And
well, that we had learned from Subramanian, that we respond to the environment to which we belong. But what was added to that, yes, one more dimension, in my case, it was a personal element. You can tell your own story. Will you tell your own story? Will you put photograph of your mother in your painting? And you said, yes, you would. And you would bring some kind of an element of what you call confessional. But not at the cost of all that the painting demands. The way the painting demands, you have to evolve a language in which they would fit, but they would not become kind of, we are not making posters, we are not making propaganda. We are making paintings of our own life. But our own life not in a sentimental manner, but our own life in which perhaps creating some kind of a story that go in the life of people, that people may identify with. So even if I were to paint, the painting called, what is this?
Speechless?
No, the city, it was my hometown which I tried to paint. But I didn't paint it like a photograph. I didn't use any photograph. But I painted the street as I was walking through that street, going right up to the top. And there you come, all kinds of people. In a way, you were journeying into the lane. And so the painting also became a kind of a journey. And that was something which was part of my search, my quest at that time. And I think that personal element, which most artists try to keep out of it, became a kind of a feature which I used as a basis for the making of many of my works.
That's true. You also used photographs like the Hiroshima, the Vietnam War, or the Man One. There are many such paintings which also speak of violence in a way. I want to move quickly to the room Tree of Life, and actually the painting, How Can You Sleep Tonight? Because I think these were disturbing times, and in the city that you have so beautifully painted over and over again, Baroda, its streets, its lanes, its alleys, the mohallas, the communities, the neighborhoods, coming to sleep, How Can You Sleep Tonight, and City for Sale. I think the tone has been that while your canvas grew, your canvas became larger, your figures became smaller, your imagery became smaller, denser, more populated, as if it was superimposed with multiple stories that became part of it. There was not a single story there. There were many, many more stories that were simultaneously needed to be told. Let's put it that way. Could you just elaborate either on City for Sale or on How Can You Sleep Tonight? Whichever. I think City for Sale is very important because for me that what you painted in 1980s, as I have placed in the exhibition, it is facing, City for Sale is facing Ahmedabad, the city Gandhi left behind. And in between you have the huge carved, which for me is like Raphael's painting of Marriage of Virgin, where you see an infinity, literally you cross and go and see the next side, and both sides speak about communal riots and about violence in the city. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Well, you asked me about City for Sale. There is actually a video in the exhibition which you may. But let me tell you how it began and how it came about. The communal situation that developed in India from the 1960s, from roughly 1969, when there were very most horrific communal riots took place in 69, 70 in the city of Baroda and Ahmedabad, and we witnessed it in front of our own eyes, which opened our eyes as to the reality that we seem to have pushed under our carpet. And this was there, that kind of a divide that was created between communities. Could you possibly incorporate this kind of a situation in your work? Is it possible? Without being didactic, without being sentimental, without being without making it like an advertisement. How would you deal with? So one way I felt was to deal with human image. City for Sale, I thought that I will take an image which is a life-size image, or the image you could identify with. If you stand about 8 feet or 10 feet away from that painting, which is a 10 foot wide, there are 3 figures which are almost lifelike, life-size. They are about 4.5 feet, but they would appear that size, if you stay away that far. And so the image that comes to mind is a very common image of people gathering to have light for a bidi or a cigarette. It's a common, ordinary phenomenon. It happens at every street corner, people would just come. But it has incendiary proportions, that it tells the stories behind. And also the kind of terrible absurdity, the violence that takes place in one corner of the city, and the other corner is totally what you call quiet and unaffected, like people are sitting in a cinema hall watching a pot boiler. And could you bring all these together? These are thoughts, these may be just odd ideas that if you were to think about. But you have to plunge into it. If you want to make it, you have to plunge into it, no matter whether it tells that story properly or not. So my paintings lasted for about 2 or 3 years, sometimes 3 to 4 years. That's because I had to change them. I had to repaint them, paint them again and again, remove some images and bring other images. And it went on and on. And so, if this painting came about, it was something which my friends, who considered art as a kind of where imagery is pure and what you call singular. This is a painting about the multiple. It's about people, about not one single individual. It's about the city, about people's life. It is literally, it's about your life. It's about my life. And hence, you could perhaps relate to it by actually entering into it. So that is the life-size image is something which allows you to enter the space of the painting. And you also become one of them. The horrors which are perpetrated there in the communal riots, the figures who are just standing there over a match, and a woman who is literally selling vegetables is about to sell the whole city. That here is the city which you have so brutalized that now it is discarded into the rubbish. And that is the city that you live in. So at the same time you love the city, but at the same time you find all the wounds of this. The city has its own scars. And how do you do it? Without painting blood, without painting scars.
Yes. Yeah.
Telling the story in whichever way. And one of the instances that came to my mind was that this particular story of the Patwas, or the Pat painter, the scroll painters of Bengal, who make a kind of what they call magic Pat, magic scroll. One of them is called Chakshudan Pat, which means you endow the eyesight to somebody. The story is that they have this Pat in which they paint the figure without an eyeball. And they find out if there is a death in a family, and they go to the family and show them the picture, saying that the person who has died is hovering in the dark. So we have this painting, and we will paint the eyeball of that particular figure, with the result that figure will be relieved of that darkness and will be able to see the world. It's called Chakshudan. For me, the idea of sitting in a cinema hall with a hoarding, or a cinema hoarding which a painter makes, in which there is a large face of the actress. And here he is about to paint the eyeball. But eyeball is not painted.
So it's not.
So it works two ways. One is that it is about endowing world, but the endowment has not taken place. So it cuts both ways. In one way, you also kill that figure. At the same time, you open its eyes. So You know, these are the, I don't know whether I put it properly, but this is how the whole thing came about. And so I put it right in the center, dead center of that painting.
This original painting, of course, is at VNA. We had to put a copy. But what is happening here, this kind of a kaleidoscopic explosion of imagery, you know, in terms of space and scale, the play between space, scale, and structure is amazing in this work, because scale variations are ample. Yeah. And I think you have deliberated it in such a way that you could actually bring in many vignettes of the city simultaneously. And the thing that you said about the light stayed with me, because when I tried to look later on, after you told me about this lighting of the match and how light can also become, you know, can be disturbing in the sense, in the way it is used, even in Ahmedabad, the city Gandhi left behind, there is, it's a completely different vocabulary, it's a completely different language you have explored, but you have a light, something burning there also, which is, of course, a vehicle burning, which is a very strong symbolic presence of, you know, what violence can do in that painting as well. But in that transition, I just want to talk quickly about how you pioneered, in a way, you know, the use of the digital medium. The use of digital medium, you know, because you went into exploration of maps from Google, which you said you learned only when you had to paint Ahmedabad with, and you wanted to have its old city maps, but also when you did Carvard, because Carvard then you transitioned from small Carvards, the small Carvard formats, to a architectural Carvard, or really a Carvard which is like a house, a home, a shrine, and people can actually walk in and out of it, you know. So I want to ask two questions again. One, from City for Sale, which is also about communal distress and violence, to Ahmedabad, you know, one saturated with color, with hues, which is, and the intensity of the color palette that you have used in City for Sale. And then when you look at Ahmedabad, which is gray, absolutely, and you have images almost, you know, you are working more on erasure and more on minimalism and more on disappearance and really somber, you know, it's more meditative, I would say, in the way that you look at Ahmedabad. And would you talk about how from City for Sale to Ahmedabad, how do you look at that in your perspective?
Well, in a way, if I were to put it, I started with small town, with the streets, and I started with some communities. I came to the city. From town to city, the big city, that's the City for Sale, which is actually city of Baroda, where I lived. And then Ahmedabad, which is a much larger city, but city has remained in our mind in such a way that that city is actually a medieval city, and it has got an old part. And if you were to look at it carefully, I don't know whether you can make out, but it has a form like this, roughly like heart, and in a sense, you know, that city is breathing. So, wanted to develop something, you know, which was related to that city, which was the city of mills. And it had nothing but all the chimneys, and for so many years now, there are no longer any of these mills left. But for me, this dark city, which I had seen in 1969 and 70 with the communal conflagration, also is the city which Gandhi inhabited. That Gandhi built his ashram on the river Sabarmati in Ahmedabad. But that is the city he abandoned, leaving behind just few things. As he left this world, we are told, and we have seen those images, that what was left behind was all his lifetime's possessions, his spectacles, his slippers, a small a watch, a hand watch, and a kind of a thali with a bowl inside for food. That's all that he left behind. So for me, Ahmedabad stands for that. And I have painted them all scattered around at the bottom of that painting. So here you are right, that painting is about meditation. What has happened to our cities? Where are our cities going? In which direction? And yes, there is a scar. That scar which is burning, it still burns, continues to burn in the large grey world of that city of Ahmedabad. So, for me, it is going from one area to another, from small town to a city, with different cities, my city, your city, and then, would you believe, I began to dream about the world. Can I paint the world? How can you paint world? Only way you can do it is by doing maps. And I was looking for a map of the world. Came upon a map called Abstoff Mapamundi, painted in 13th century in Europe, and was last seen in Hamburg before the Second World War, where it disappeared in the bombing. And I found a little picture postcard, a round little picture postcard. How do I reconstruct that world? Somebody had dreamt of that world in the 13th century in Europe. So for him it was the body of Christ. The whole world was body of Christ. So there is a head of Christ, there are hands of Christ and feet of Christ at the bottom. And there is also hell and heaven and Jerusalem in the center. But I thought, let me begin with it. And how do I change it?
Yes.
That digital technology came my way and I was able to reconstruct that whole world again. And I kept on making it again and again. I made about, I think about 25 such Mapamundis based on one. And I will give you one little story. Victorian Tapestry Workshop in Melbourne invited me to give one of my work for making a tapestry. And I said, here are some works including a Mapamundi. Then they chose that. And they said they will weave this. And they wove it. It took them months, for several, weavers working on it. But the biggest surprise that struck me was that the tapestry that was made of Mapamundi, which is about 13 feet wide, was very close to the original Mapamundi, which was destroyed in the Second World War. So I thought that I will keep making this world coming to life again and again. And I even ended up making, even with the help of my friends Suresh and Sukhdev, a video which is also there. But you also mentioned Kavar. I don't know whether I am a restless soul. Perhaps I am. I get tired of something when I have done it and I want to look for something else. So I am tired of the easel painting format, the rectangle. And I thought, do I have any other And I came across, I remember once I went to meet Jyotindra Jain and in the Crafts Museum I saw a cupboard. It was a traditional cupboard, wooden box, which opens in two directions. And then I came to know that such cupboards are made in very light wood and the performers carry it on their body and open it and tell stories of gods and goddesses. Here was something I could use. I would make my own cupboard. But I opened it on all four sides because I was not wearing it on my body. I was putting it out.
Nor was it a religious object for you.
And it was not a religious object because my cards would include demons besides others. But it was about life of people. And I made a series of cards, but one card which I would like, if you have the image, it's called migration.
Yeah, you have migration.
They are showing the images. Why migration? Because migration is a constant, eternal theme. People have been migrating from God knows from what period of time. And you have stories of migration in Christianity, in Judaism, in Islam, in Hinduism, and in our own world we move from place to place, and sometimes we are forced to move, forced migration. So I thought that I will use that particular theme and build a story around. And the cupboard is something which is like a little secular shrine, which you can open by your own hand. And you can see from left to right to left, then you can open the doors at the bottom, throw doors at the back, doors on the sides, and you can combine those images in your mind. Whichever way you combine but this was something which I thought I would bring in. There are a lot of images which are about people moving away, migrating. But it also brought me close to the image of Kabir, the poet Kabir, whose poetry I had known from my childhood, but I thought that I should bring it here. So I borrowed an image of Kabir from a traditional painting, painted it in my own way by taking only a detail. But there is one particular thing which comes to mind. I don't know whether it connects with the questions that you have asked. Is that I had once joined what they call Kabir Yatra, a kind of a journey of Kabir. People organized in central India. And I had seen hundreds of people coming to listen to the singers called Tippaniyas. And I was quite amazed to see these hundreds and thousands of people, so I stopped one of them. I said that Kabir, how does Kabir enter your world? So he said, it's like all of us. I said, in what way? He said, when we meet each other, we say Saheb Bandagi. Saheb means Kabir Saheb. Bandagi would mean I bow to you. And then they said that we all look at ourselves. And ourselves, what do you mean? He said we put our hands like this in front of us. And then think of Kabir. But actually, it is our own face that we are putting it there, that we, as though our hands are a mirror, and we are looking at our own selves. And I was most moved by that. Somebody, non-entity, somebody who came to me and told me about this, that this is how you discover yourself. Look at yourself first before looking at the world, and see what you contain. And Kabir has said that Ya ghat bhitar sur chand hai, Ya ghat naulakh tara. It is this in very self, in this very pot, in this very body, in this vessel, lie the sun and moon and the thousands and millions of stars. So look inside, not outside, not outer world. One of the things which I did was actually to put a mirror in that world.
Yes, you did.
There is a mirror. And there are also images of Kabir. Now, this is how you learn from people. I learned from an ordinary person about Kabir. I would have never learnt it, otherwise. So this is how you stumble upon, what you are not satisfied with what you have done, you want to do something else. and you are looking for something else, and you come upon such experiences, and that eventually even resulted into making of multiple cowards. And one coward, I thought that it is not a small coward which you can see by putting it on a table. You could literally walk into it. So that coward is bigger than, and use right word that I use, it literally turned it into architecture. So it was that architecture in which you find yourself. And there are so many stories connected with that.
But just quickly, I feel that the accordion book and the coward both gave you the possibility of flexibility of narrating your stories or narration. So they became, one, you relieved them of the wall, that easel tradition thing was gone. It could be a portable thing, it could be a mobile thing, it could be used in whichever way, it could be opened and closed, and could be read and reread in many ways. That was one thing. Also, now that you touched upon Kabir, which would be my last bit in this conversation, I mean, I'm sorry, but we cannot, there is so much here. I told you right in the beginning, I don't know where to stop and I don't know what not to ask. But to just tell you that it's been so encouraging to hear people come and tell you about the exhibition, about your work, and how they've learned from it, what they've experienced, and how they really feel about it. So they have come again and again to see it, and the presence of the in your work. For instance, in the Tree of Life room, you have Kabir, but you have also the Black Commandos with him, okay? And whether the whole idea of him being anti-establishment, anti-one religion, and many such things that inspire you have been part of this whole exhibition, almost moving from one gallery to another. You see these as recurring motifs or traveling motifs, and I know when Riaz Komu had visited this exhibition, he had a beautiful thing to say. He told me that throughout the exhibition, he felt as if the artist was walking with Kabir and Gandhi through each gallery, each room in the experience of what was being conveyed. So Kabir, Gandhi, there are many more. There is Meera, there is Mary Magdalene, there is St. Francis. They all appear and reappear in your work. And that when you talked about Mappa Mundi, I was constantly thinking of what Kumkum Sangari had written about requilting the map. How you requilt the map and every time create a different world or create a new world. And through those little membranes, those little ways in which you really interweave multiple stories. It could be Gaza, it could be something happening in, it could be just nuclear testing, it could be something else, but they all come together, and it really is a matter of how we will read into it. There is a call for open interpretation, there's a call for open, you have to just go into these works to really explore and find many of these symbolisms that you really invest in. So my last question comes to you in the form of what you were now learning from people, and the idea of Sangat. Okay? The idea of Sangat in the big coward, where people come together, the idea of Sangat in Karwa, which is your most recent work, and yes, what is the world without Sangat? So I'm asking you about Sangat and how really that became your preoccupation since the big coward.
Well, to answer your question, how do I proceed? You see, the only way by which you could perhaps bring people together is by making them talk. And that is the essence of Sangat. Sangat means sitting together, coming together, and talking to each other. So my idea in this was borrowed from, I took images from different, what you call, faith systems. From Christianity, like I took images from Lucio and from Giotto. I took images of a Zen priest. I took image of an Islamic Sufi figure. I took images from Mughal, from others, and I brought images together. But how do you make them? These images, when I saw them in originals, many of them in what you call miniature painting, small painting, they were tiny, about 1 inch or 1.5 inch. And with the help of my assistants, we enlarged them to life size, make it a living figure. And we put them all together facing each other on 2 doors opening at the end of that cover, where they are looking at each other and hopefully talking to each other. So in a way, it's coming together. It's a kind of a cupboard which would allow you to have a sort of sangat as you move in and out of it. You mentioned the recent painting.
Sorry,
How do I say?
Sorry, 1 second. No politicians there, actually. Your Sangat is full of what Samira and Diksha have beautifully written in one of the articles I read. They are all saints and skeptics.
Yeah.
Okay, which means that the idea is that they are the people who are reflecting on the world, who are debating, or who are really worried and anxious about the world in one sense.
Yes, yes, yes.
Am I right about that?
Right, absolutely right.
And then when you move to karma, you have more people join you in that karma, and maybe you can elaborate on that.
You are absolutely right, because the Sangat should bring all people of all kinds, those who are believers and those who are not. Those who can talk to each other, can meet and then find out what their world, the worlds in which they live. And then perhaps find some kind of a way of connecting. That is the idea. Well, the painting which I finished last year, that is called Karma. I don't know how to put it. But it is I had seen a painting by 18th century painter called Nansuk about a boat adrift in a river. The painting shows a boat in which there is a whole army. And there are houses, there are palaces, there are even elephants and horses. The story is that W.G. Archer, one of the art historians, has written about it, that the small-time ruler of Jasrota, Balwant Singh, at one point of time must have felt that the great Ranjit Singh might run over his kingdom. So he is imagining, say, kind of a story of departure, leaving or rather taking the whole world to which Balwant Singh belonged to. So it's a boat that carries the whole world. So that was the idea which I thought that I would perhaps bring in my world, as many things as I could. And that went into number of stages. But I designed it as a large painting with as big a boat as possible. And on one side I built a kind of a forest, just forest. On the other side, all the artists, the great artists, many of them I have admired over the years. And if I were to embark upon a journey, if I were to go on a voyage, where would I, how would I, with whom would I go? I would invite them all. And that is how that painting came into existence. It can be talked about in many different ways, but that is how that painting was construed. Anything else?
Could it, I would just add to it, could it be a boat in troubled waters?
We are always in troubled water.
Because when I see it now again and again, since it's here in the exhibition, it's there, and the conversations that we have been having recently are all about the uncertainties and the precariousness of life that is there, which is what can a painter bring to that?
What can a painter do but paint?
But through the paint, would you say something more? I read once an article and read an essay in a book which said that when artists know that they cannot reform the real world out there, they find ways and means to do it. So there is an alternate way of bringing hope, bringing healing, bringing or provoking or even making people aware of where we are heading. What would you say about it? What is your concept of what an artist can do?
Well, the world that I have seen over the years, and in many a situation and time, I have seen that world has been in great distress. And we constantly live with that distress. But at the same time, we continue to live our own life. So there is that element of moving. How do you move? Move in your mind. Move with all that you have with you. Collect it. Put it together. And then make a kind of a package. And perhaps find yourself a boat that will make you sail. And we are all sailing. And we are carrying with us all the world, the images of your life. And that is perhaps the way you can live with. You cannot change the world because a painting cannot change the world. But let me give you an example that paintings which Max Beckmann made during the Nazi regime, and they were all herded up, they were sent away as illustrations of Shakespeare. But even if you look at them today, you realize the kind of violence that was perpetrated in those days. Those paintings are full of those scars. And you still look at them, meditate upon them, and hopefully you come to build a world which is different, free of violence. But this is what, by painting violence, you are not perpetrating violence, you are contemplating, you are actually made to think about how to overcome this. So in that sense, you are always traversing from one world to the other, and you keep a world in front of you. And what is that world? That is the world of hope. And if I were to say in two simple words, art is a synonym of hope.
Thank you very much, sir, of worlds within worlds. And I would say that you're not just simply narrating the world, you are remaking it for us every time through your work. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. Any questions? You have Gulam sir right here.
Somebody has a question over there. You give a mic.
2 or 3 questions we can take definitely.
Yeah. Am I audible?
I don't
think I
know.
am.
But you will have to help me if I don't hear it properly.
Yes, sir. So, I really don't know how to greet you now, but my question is that the Kabir, what I am really seeing here now, and in your paintings, it looks like to me that Kabir is an attempt of escaping world for you, the world which you created and the language you created. But in that attempt, you created one another world for yourself, which is of Kabir. So, I'm not very sure how this goes ahead, and it's not really a question, but how would you see this and what it is really to you?
I didn't get it very clearly. Will you put it in an...
You just want to ask the world that he has created for Kabir? Are you saying that?
I'm trying to say that when I see Kabir in your paintings,
In his paintings?
yes.
Yes.
It looks like to me that Kabir is an attempt to escape the world which he has created earlier.
Attempt to escape the world?
Yes, an attempt to escape the language he has created for himself. But in that attempt, he creates another language which is of Kabir. So, yeah, if that's clear.
No, I don't think there is ever any intention of escape. I do not think there is any intention of that kind. If I were to invoke Kabir, I think he has relevance in our life today. And very simply, I try to bring that word that he created to our world and to see whether that word can perhaps help us sail through. And to my mind, Kabir is one of those. Gandhi is one other. You know, those who can perhaps work as kind of what you call, you need to hold a hand of somebody, and whether it is from the history or from your own life, but you need to sail through this terrible world that you belong to. And here, I think Kabir comes. I said that in this country, we live in multiple times. You know, we have people living in different time frames. So, for us, it is not to return to 18th century or the other centuries. We can even, you know, go back to prehistoric time and see ourselves there, because there are people who also belong to what you call quote unquote primitive times. So, I think Kabir comes our way that way, and I would imagine Kabir would surely agree to come to your life.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Good evening, sir. Very small question. I usually take children around in the museum to show them these paintings, and there are many places where we often stumble, and even though I might not be completely aware of the specific interpretation of the symbol or image within that painting, yet I point it out and I open it for the children to interpret that. One such image is of Kabir in Tree of Life, where he is seen pointing at the ground and at himself. Could you maybe just help me clear that symbolism so that next time when I take the children around, I could help them with that?
Talking about symbolism?
Which image?
In the Tree of Life, Tree of Life image.
Tree of Life.
Yeah.
Oh, the one which with the commandos.
Here
In this one, with the Tree of Life, you have
The one that's painted in Bhopal
Kabir
as well.
center, and
but you are also talking about Kabir, is that right?
Yeah, so there's Kabir appears in that painting,
Yes, it does.
and he is seen pointing at the ground, and one finger is pointed at himself. Now, I mean, I often bring in the example of the dervishes and how when they twirl, there's a channel that's being created, and all these kind of connections along with that image. But, and it's interesting to give this kind of exercise to the children, and they come up with many interpretations for this. But I'm just curious about that image and how, instead of the heaven and the ground, the earth, Kabir points at himself.
By the way, that painting is a maquette of the actual mural that I made in the assembly in Bhopal. The mural is about 31 feet high and 21 feet wide. So there are so many images. So image of a tree of life is the image of the world, by the way, very simply. So I see it in the form of a tree. And so it invites all kinds of both human beings and creatures to inhabit it. So it is something which also brings Kabir along. And so if Kabir is there, there are many other equally important figures in that particular painting. But there is no time to talk about everything. But yes, maybe Kabir is a hobby horse, or Kabir appears to me wherever I go. So in that sense, that has. I don't know whether I have answered her question.
No, she has asked a particular symbolism, but it's open for interpretation in many ways, in pointing himself or pointing to the
Well,
earth.
there, Kabir, I have painted with a man who is a cynic and who is questioning Kabir. I don't know whether you will be able to see it, but if you see, there are two. Kabir is standing, and there is a man who is questioning him. So, in a way, it's a different image of Kabir that I have painted there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I can tell you later personally.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Hi, sir. Just going to take this opportunity to say thank you for this wonderful conversation. What I am wondering about the mediums that you've used, and I myself has experienced how painting can be a limiting medium in the arts. So I did see a few of your ceramic pieces, sculptural pieces. If you could maybe potentially talk about your exploration in that medium and what successes and failures you felt in that.
Paint in ceramics, in doing ceramics.
Oh.
Just
Well, I have some kind of a insatiable desire to explore a variety of media. So as she had pointed out that I made prints, graphic prints, I also at one stage decided to try sculpture, and that was in ceramic. And so that series of works which are on display here were made at around, I think, 1990, around that time. And I wanted to make ceramic something different from how it is normally viewed as. Not like a simple pot or something which is, but I wanted to see it as a sculpture. So a tree is imagined and the column is imagined with a figure on top. And then there is a landscape in sculpture, which I tried to make in that figure. So this is how I tried to explore the medium in different colors. But the colors of ceramic, as you know, are different because they are colors that come out of fire. They are not just colors, but their colors actually go through the, flames, and then they get settled into that. So it is an entirely different quality.
So my question was basically why as artists, especially painters, we experience this sense of frustration with the 2D medium, and there is this exploration that we seek outside of it. I'm sure you might have experienced it as well with your other works as well.
But you as an artist without frustration can also explore mediums. Nobody stops any artist. I think all artists do that. In fact, when Sir was studying, he would have explored in fine arts there. When you do painting or when you actually do visual arts, you actually go through different studios. You learn painting, you learn printmaking, you learn sculpture, you learn everything. So it's not out of frustration. Okay, it can be that you felt a need to express in a specific way, which could be limiting in painting maybe, and therefore you would go to another medium. That is the way I would put it. I don't think that artists just only out of frustration would, Arpita Singh still paints, and she's been painting for now 70 years, and what an amazing painter she is even now. She's working with pure painting even. So it's not to be seen in particularly in that way. I don't think you frame it that way, I would say.
Well, in a simpler way, I would put it like this, that you explore as many possibilities of a medium that is possible. But then there are limits of each medium. So if you want to go beyond those limits, then you try another medium. And that is how the new mediums come in your way.
But to add to your question, I would say for Gulam sir, I have not been able to show here in this exhibition, he has created environments in which he has used canvas as a field, literally as earth, on which he has placed objects, sculptures, objects, many other things. And so it's an ensemble of a different kind where many kinds of materials coalesce and come together. So that has been something that he has been interested in of late or in recent years. So it is a natural need that he wanted also objects to be part of, or sculpture to be part of that language, let us say. Okay? Yeah. Anyways, I think this has been a very interesting conversation for me at least, and I hope for others. Before I call it a day, I want to thank Nilima ma'am sitting here, not just for her generous hospitality, but I think I have had really intense learning conversations with her about Sir's practice. And I would always look forward, and the person who was with me on those occasions is Vishaldar, who is also sitting here, who also helped me and worked with me on this exhibition as far as the design and the installation is concerned. So thank you so much. And Geeta, you've always been an inspiration, and you are going to now be the next one to talk on the 24th. So let me announce that on 24th, the eminent art critic Geeta Kapoor is going to speak on Gulam Sir's practice. And I remember Vivan telling me many years ago that here is a person on whom she'll never say no if you ask her to speak about. And that is Gulammohammed Sheikh. I remember very clearly Vivan's words. So Geeta is going to give a talk, and then there will be a discussion between Geeta, Gulam Sir and Gayatri Sinha. That is 24th, 25th. The show, unfortunately, comes to a close. So please catch up with the show if you haven't seen it. Spend more time now that you've listened to the artist himself talk about his works here, his journey, his creative journey through decades. And before I end, I want to thank my team, Avigna Bhattacharya, Aditi Gidyal, and others who have worked on Debashri Banerjee, who really slogged on the loans for this exhibition. We were fortunate to get many loans. We were not able to get some loans. Nevertheless, the exhibition has taken its shape and has worked in the way that it should be. So and of course, thank you, sir. Without your practice,
thank you,
and without your support, it would have not been possible. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here.
Thank you, Gulam sir. Thank you, Roobina ma'am, for such unforgettable stories and insights. We would like to share a small token of our appreciation, if we may.
Oh, Baba. Thank you, Maria. सब चलिए, कुछ तो उठाना होगा, उठा के जाना, चलो. Okay.
Again, thank you to them and thank you to all of you for being such a wonderful audience. We have arranged some refreshments for you outside, and also we would request you to please leave a feedback by scanning a screen that we put outside. That would really help us.